Welcome to the Fantasy Source Football Podcast. My name is David A. Arnott, sitting here with Brad Pinkerton. And what a game last night. We had our matchup against each other in the Fantasy Source Experts League. And, of course, I had Stephen Gostkowski down 10 points going into last night's game. How many points did he score, Brad?
I believe it was 11.
Yes, it
or
was 11.
In other words, just enough.
Yes, indeed. And, you know, if a lot of people, I'm hearing stories from just my friends about last night's game. Randy Moss did 0 catches, just scored 0 points. Heartbreak all over the place. Fascinating week in fantasy sports with the Andre Johnson stuff, on and on and on. What were the big stories that you saw coming out of this week?
Well, really, I think one of the biggest stories is there aren't those fantasy saviors that are emerging where you can rush to the waiver wire, pick somebody up, and plug them in for the bye week and, not skip a beat. I think really the guy that everybody's going to be rushing to grab maybe this week is Ryan Terrain. And he seems like a temporary solution. He could be the long-term option in Washington, which is great, but I'm not really confident about that offensive line or the offense in general. So as far as him being like a top-tier fantasy option from here on out, I'm not too optimistic about that.
I mean, remember, Mike Shanahan is the originator of the running back by committee, the modern running back by committee. So, I mean, if you were one of those people that's just looking for a running back and you were all over Liddell Betts this week, or you were hoping that Willis McGahee would do something, you got lucky and realized that the Ravens are going to be playing him. Ryan Terrain's your guy. Hope that you're high up in the waiver list, I guess, right?
Well, I wouldn't burn a high waiver on him because of what you just said, running back by committee. It's still Washington. The offensive line's a little shaky, and you just don't know quite what you're going to get. I don't think he's worth the number 1, maybe even top 3 waiver claim.
Okay, so what were the other big stories? One of the other big stories that came out here was Andre Johnson just not playing. Mm-hmm. And we talked last week about how you handle those 4 o'clock games with the guy who's a game time decision, and we saw lots of different strategies for guys who are 1 p.m. starts. I know that Danny Amendola was a guy that was available in some leagues that was getting picked up a lot in order to replace Andre. What are your thoughts on those 4 p.m. game time decision guys? And you have guys that are ready to go at 1 p.m. You know they're going to play, but they might be 50% of the player of your great player that's coming on later.
Yeah, you have to protect yourself against that. I mean, when at all possible, if you know you have a game time decision in the latter half of Sunday, you have to grab a guy who also has that batch of games. If you're banking on a Danny Amendola at 1 o'clock versus possibly Andre Johnson at 4 o'clock, that's a bad situation. You shouldn't have even grabbed Amendola.
So beyond the injured player type stuff, I guess the other major story that's been coming out that we've kind of seen after this week is we have an emergence of guys who are kind of settling into who they are in the season. I would say that just from personal experience, guys like guys on the San Diego Chargers are absolutely going insane. Phillip Rivers, I believe, is thrown for over 400 yards twice. Antonio Gates is going crazy. Are there guys that you would say are pretty much established that they're better than you thought they were at the beginning of the season? Or is there anybody along those lines? Or before we get to the disappointing players, who are the guys that you would say that maybe they ought to be elevated to wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 status when previously you thought they were reserves, or maybe a quarterback that you would say, okay, yeah, you have to absolutely start him if you got him, that you didn't necessarily think that early in the season?
Well, I think you have to start this with Arian Foster. And coming into the season, we knew he was going to be a sleeper, but I don't think anyone could have told you that he was going to be this good, to be leading the NFL in rushing, and to the amount that he has compiled to this point is absurd. We're talking about Emmitt Smith levels here, and no one could have predicted that. Now, the big red flag with him coming into the season was Gary Kubiak, and will he stick with one running back, or is he going to jump all over the place? Well, even Gary Kubiak can't make a change now. So if you have Arian Foster, you were sitting on a gold mine. If he can keep it up all year, he's going to be the headliner of a lot of winning fantasy teams.
What about the disappointing players, guys that you looked out there and said, hey, these guys got to be starters before the season? I know as a 49ers fan, I'm wearing red and gold toned glasses here, and I thought Michael Crabtree was going to be really good. But as of at least going into this week, I believe Darius Hayward-Bay had more receptions than him. I mean, that's a huge disappointment from my perspective.
Crabtree certainly is, but you know what? Looking back, the red flag with him was Alex Smith and the shaky 49ers offense. So,
oh, now you tell me.
Yeah, so it's not exactly a surprise. It is very disappointing, though. I think some owners are yelling Ray Rice right now. He has certainly been disappointing, but you have to look at his schedule. It's been pretty tough. yes, your first round, your top 3 running back, like he should be able to handle those kind of defenses, but it's been tough. So there is a reason, at least. It's not just someone who has fallen off and not performing for whatever reason. Ryan Matthews is another disappointment. You look at his as injury-related, and now there's some sort of conflict back there with Ryan Tolbert. So, Mike Tolbert. But it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out.
Now, I would say that those two guys are probably very different in the way you react to them, though. That Matthews, as a rookie, like there were high expectations for him coming out of the draft, but I would say that I would have a much quicker hook with him than with Rice, who has actually been there and proven that he could be, 60 receptions, something crazy like that, and especially for PPR leads, and get those yards on the ground.
Right, but the problem with giving Matthews the hook is that he hasn't failed. It's been injury-related. It's been, okay, we're going to start Tolbert to kind of ease you back into action. Like, owners don't really know what to expect with Matthews right now, and that's the toughest part.
Yeah, I mean, like you kind of have to, if you draft him in the first round, if you draft him that high or even the second round, you kind of stuck with saying like I said earlier in the podcast, you're figuring out if these guys are who they are. I mean, you don't know if that Ryan Matthews is who you thought he was, to coin a phrase, as it were. But I would say, yeah, maybe it's harsh to say give him the hook right now, but I would definitely be thinking about it if I was his owner.
Yeah, you're definitely thinking about it. But then again, you're also trying to replace a first or second round running back, and he's in an offense that can score points. He's eventually going to get a shot, and you just don't want to miss out on that first big week.
All right, Brad. Well, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Thanks a lot.